Welcome to the Reconciling Mission podcast, where we explore missional engagement with our local communities and a broader understanding of reconciliation. I'm Mina, your host, Network and Development Lead. I'm a priest, an author, and someone who has the privilege of leading two wonderful churches in Derby. So join me as we dive into rich conversations, biblical insights, and inspiring stories of churches and individuals finding ways to engage with our neighbours and contribute to reconciliation in our local contexts. So hello everybody and welcome to our Reconciling Mission podcast, and today we are talking to Richard Westwood. Richard is another clergy person who has been involved in the Reconciling Mission programme. So Richard, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about who you are, where you are and how you became involved in Reconciling Mission.
A key bit to be aware of to do with St Anne's and me and Reconciling Mission was that when the pandemic struck in 2020, St Anne's and other local organisations came together to form something called Westwood Be a Friend, a mutual aid group, which started in COVID to help with people like prescriptions and befriending and what have you, which happened in many places. And in the course of the Reconciling Mission programme, St Anne's and other partners had to take a decision. Well, was that just for COVID, or is there a job that our community needs us as community collaborators to carry on doing? And so that was a key part, I guess, of my thinking and exploring as I joined in the Reconciling Mission programme.
Tell us a bit more about the community where you're working. So what are the challenges of that community? What are the joys of that community? Tell us a bit more.
There's real cost of living issues for many people. A lot of families struggling to put enough food on the table, struggling with enough money for energy costs and so forth. Quite a lot of people are in the older members of the community are quite isolated, and those features are persistent. You know, there's not an easy and quick fix for those. So people are kind of living with those issues rather than kind of just traveling through them for a short time. But that means there's a level of kindness also about the place, I feel anyway, and certainly compared to other places I lived and worked in. And the goodwill that was there seemed to be able to carry on, into this Westwood Be a Friend project, which has now become a charity. I think the setting for the church, St Anne's Church anyway, is that our church congregation is very much in the north of 60 category in terms of its age bracket, which means there's a good wish to be a blessing to the community, but perhaps not as much energy within the individuals who are part of that community, of the church, to do all the things that we might ordinarily want to do. So in other church settings, you might have a willing team of people who've got energy and vigour to be able to go on and do stuff for the church. St Anne's community, certainly a few years ago, had lots of longing for that, but perhaps not the levels of ability and vigour to actually do stuff that they perhaps would have wanted to do, which therefore forced us to some degree into being more open to partnership outside the community of the church than we would perhaps otherwise have been.
So tell us then, what difference has the Reconciling Mission programme made to how you think about mission? You mentioned perhaps an openness in the congregation to working in partnership with people outside the church.
I was one of 5 people from Lichfield Diocese who were invited to be a part of the Reconciling Mission programme, and I was a little bit quizzical as to why I'd been asked by our bishop to do that, because I wasn't quite sure what the setting was, either for me or the church, that meant that was a good thing. In the end, I decided not to look into it too much. I thought I'll take this and go with it because it looked an exciting program to be involved with. And I think for me, the Reconciling Mission program came at just a really God opportune moment, because it enabled me to, I think, lead the church in a sort of godly gamble kind of way, to take a kind of faith-based risk, I suppose. And it gave me confidence to be able to lead the church in that kind of a possibility mentality rather than a problem mentality. I think previously, before the Reconciling Mission program, I would have been much more cautious. I would have been circumspect, making sure that what I was doing was had been replicated elsewhere by other good practitioners. And I think the Reconciling Mission Program enabled me to see that there were good, different, godly, kingdom of God type things happening in all sorts of places that were very strange shapes, but had this lovely kingdom of God DNA somewhere wired into them. And that enabled me to say, well, maybe St. Anne's could be a place where that can happen too. And this idea of a godly gamble, for me, becomes a thing I return to when there's a possibility. I say, well, maybe we could do it. And it's still with a little bit of nervous faith that goes with that. But the logic is, let's see how this might go. And it leads me to try and help the church to say yes when we can. If someone comes and says, can we, whether it's a church member or if it's a community partner particularly, I nearly always try and find a good reason to be able to say yes, or if not saying yes exactly, saying we'll try and see if we can say yes, to show a willingness to collaborate. And that's at the heart of it, I think. I think my sense of what the Reconciling Mission Program did particularly was to help me ask questions that were not within the church. One of the phrases that gets used in the program is about asking God questions, not church questions.
Yeah.
The anxiety about numbers attending this, that, or the other service, about finances and all that comes with that, becomes if you're not careful, a dominating set of thoughts for a church leader. And to ask the question, what might God be doing, rather than what's the church doing, or what does the church need to do? It invites us to say, well, what's going on in the community? What part of God's kingdom can I see happening outside the walls of the church or outside the church community that we might be able to partner with, bless, pray for, applaud, in any sort of way? It's not saying the kingdom of God only happens in the church, but it says that the church can be a helpful agent in seeing the wider kingdom of God come about.
So you kind of talked there about the partnerships with people outside the church and seeing parts of God's kingdom out there that were not connected with the church at all, just things that were happening that were really echoes of God's kingdom. So a question that I've got from my own context really is how easy was it to take your congregation with you on that? Because you've been on this course and you've had some ideas buzzing around and spoken to people. So in my experience, sometimes it's quite difficult to get people who are inside the church to actually consider partnership outside the church.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a bit about that?
For St. Anne's, perhaps it was maybe a little bit easier because we weren't in the luxurious position of being able to do these things ourselves. The fact that we hadn't got the network of people to be able to do all the things that we thought the community needed meant that we had to go on a collaborative route. A significant part of the process of embedding this approach was to have an open discussion about our vision statement. So I think it was a point in our church council where we looked deliberately at whether this was a direction we wanted to go in. I didn't try and do it in secret, if you know what I mean. I kind of invited the church to say, these collaborations, this opportunity is there. Let's explore how this might go. There are options that go that way. But at the back of that, as well as my sort of argument and offering, if you like, was a reality in people's minds that there may not be that much of an alternative. In some ways, our relative sparsity of volunteers to do community was something which pushed us in the direction. There was an acknowledgement that our previous model of church operation wasn't going to be sufficient or appropriate in this age, and also on the back of those two things, a deliberate program of the church the church council looking at the approach I was suggesting and deciding whether it was something we wanted to do.
Are there any other highlights for you that have happened since being on the Reconciling Mission?
Well, I think I've mentioned already about the Be a Friend project. In the middle of last year, so that's after I left the Reconciling Mission program, we were approached by a youth club that had previously been based in a purpose-built youth centre, which had been sold by the local council in order to make room for a much needed new doctor's surgery. And part of the outcome of that is, sorry, youth club, you're going to be not with anywhere to go. So they tried a couple of sports clubs and had found that the facilities didn't work for them, or there was not really the kind of welcome they needed. There were rumbles and rumours about young people not really behaving as they should. So they came and found their way to St Anne's and approached and said, look, is there any chance once a month could we come and have a session for young people in your church? And so there was a discussion at the church council, which kind of went on two strands. Well, I've heard all sorts of things about this youth club. This sports club found that they did this outside there, and it should be the council's fault, because they've evicted them. So, and then I let the conversation roam a little bit, and then somebody else said, "Well, we can't do nothing, can we?" And I said, well, what do you think would be a good way forward here? And they said, well, why don't we try them for 3 months and see how it goes? This is sort of possibility, godly gamble kind of thing. And I said, it's reasonable to have concerns about whether our church building might get trashed. But if there's a group of young people who need somewhere to go, and we've got a building, then I think joining those two dots isn't that hard, is it? And again, there was a significant majority of people in the congregation in the church council said, yes, we should do this. And we went ahead, and that's been now what's happened, not just for the 3 months, but for the previous another 3 months on top of that. And in the course of they were struggling for cash themselves. It's a small youth club charity which functions now in a number of sort of roaming places, in Burntwood being one of them, but other areas in nearby towns. And in the course of conversations I was having with the leaders, they said, thank you very much for hosting us. We're so glad you do that. We've been able to get some money for an intergenerational activity. We would love to put on a Christmas lunch for you guys, and to have some of your congregation come along, and we'll get the young people to teach, to show some of your congregation the sort of stuff they do. So there was a lovely thing. We ended up having it on the first Sunday in December. It didn't end up being a Christmas lunch, but a buffet. But that's beside the point, really. But and there were some lovely moments where there was a gentleman in his 80s being shown how to use a VR headset by one of the young people, and all sorts of things where this lovely intergenerational thing was able to happen. And it wouldn't have happened had we not said yes. Had we not taken the godly gamble, if we'd said, no, this church is far too precious, the building's too precious, I'm afraid we're concerned for you, but you're going to need to go elsewhere. Well, I don't know what would have happened really.
That's brilliant. What are your next steps, do you think? And what are your hopes for the future?
Well, next steps, I'm going to park the next steps to do with St Anne's, because that is an ongoing thing. The Bert Be a Friend thing is now kind of a machine in motion, so that needs to be run where it can really, and St Anne's partnership with that is now a little bit more of St Anne's DNA. So I think my hope for the future has to do with the church, and it is a broader hope really. I forget who said it, but someone said to me that the church is at its best when it gives itself away, and we're in an age in the life of the church in our country, I think, where we're incredibly cautious, very nervous as churches, and almost scrabbling for resources and finance, people, almost trying to protect what we've got. And my hope is that more and more churches might just be able to say, well, let's give away what we've got. Let's see if we can't be generous in our invitation to partner with people of goodwill in our neighbourhood, and see where that takes us. And that's kind of quite aside from whatever theological standpoints people might have about the church. because people of all theological backgrounds can do this. It's as much about a mindset, I think, as it is about any sort of theology.
Richard, thank you so much. It's been really amazing to talk to you and to hear the stories that you have. So thanks so much for speaking to us. And for everybody else, we'll see you next time.